Lord a hand clap this morning. Amen, amen. What an honor it is to have all of you with us for our 9 a.m. Sunday school hour, our Bible hour. This is going to be a wonderful, wonderful day. We're wrapping up our Mental Health Month series, Your Mind Matters, and it has been a wonderful month. It has been a great month here at the POL. God has moved in mighty ways. We have heard from some great speakers. I want to give honor to all of those that took part in planning, organizing, scheduling, creative ideas for this month. They did a wonderful job. All of our speakers, our panel from the first week, we heard from Brother Shannon. Brother Austin headed that panel up. Who else? Jennifer Mata. I'm forget who else was on that panel. Cheryl. Miss Cheryl. How could I forget Miss Cheryl? Oh my goodness, how? But then all the speakers, we heard from Rhea, we've heard from Dan, and then today, what a treat, you're going to hear from Miss Jamie Yeats. It's been a great month. It's been a great month. And what is even more exciting is to know that every week of this month, we have baptized somebody in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of their sins. Aren't you excited about that? And it's not going to stop today, because today is Pentecost Sunday. Today's a freedom day. Today's a celebration day. Amen? Amen. It's going to be a wonderful time today. At this moment, I am honored to bring to this podium a friend, a lady of God, a praying lady. So thankful for her. Miss Jamie Yeats is going to come this morning. Would you give Miss Jamie a hand this morning?
Good morning. Thank God for this opportunity. If I'm completely honest, I will tell you I am extremely nervous. And I usually don't get nervous when I speak on Sunday mornings, but it's usually from a spiritual perspective. And this morning I'm going like completely clinical. I even have a PowerPoint. It's like a whole teaching thing. And so it's a little bit out of my element, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to shed light on a very important topic, anxiety. And I feel like this is something that it's a very common word right now in our society. It's almost like a trend, anxiety, like, oh, I have so much anxiety or this and that. But on top of the trend of anxiety, it is a real issue. It is a real mental health issue that can be debilitating. And so I am super excited about being able to shed some light onto that topic today. Okay. All right. So last year, someone bought me a shirt, or maybe 2 years ago, and it had a sticker like that on it, but it said, hello, instead of my name is, it just said hello. And then underneath it, it said, I'm probably anxious. And I thought it was so funny that I wore the shirt. I almost wore it this morning, but I have to sing, and so I was like, I don't know that would translate well on the platform. So I refrained myself. But I want to start off telling you a little bit about my story. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but I suffer from anxiety, and I was not diagnosed until about 8 years ago. Looking back now, I can see that I've had anxiety most of my life. I just didn't know what anxiety looked like at the time. And then when I went through training and learned what anxiety looked like, of course, it wasn't me. So about 8 years ago, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting at home with my family. We had just eaten. I think we were watching football maybe. And I began to feel like my chest got really, really tight for no reason, just out of the blue. Just felt really, really tight, and I started having trouble breathing. And I told Anthony, I was like, something's wrong with my heart. Like, I feel like something's wrong, and I don't know what's wrong. And so we kind of monitored it for a little while, and then I was like, I'm going to go to urgent care. Don't tell the kids anything, but I'm going to go to urgent care because I'm not feeling well. Something's wrong. So I went to urgent care. They immediately told me to go to the ER at Lourdes after they did a ECG. And so, or EKG. And so I went to Lourdes, and I was texting with Sister Holly, and she came and met me up there because I didn't want Anthony to come because if Anthony came, the kids would ask where he's going, and then I didn't want this to be a whole thing. And so Holly came and met me at Lourdes, and we were talking, and in a normal conversation, all of a sudden, my limbs completely locked up. I began hyperventilating. We went from having a perfectly normal conversation about nothing stressful to me in a full-blown panic attack. That was the very first panic attack I had ever had. And I didn't even know at the time that I thought I was having a stroke. Like, I literally thought I'm about to die because the pain was radiating from my chest down my arm. I couldn't move. My dad was texting me, and I had the phone in my hand, and when my hand locked up, the phone just fell out of my hand. I had no control at all over what was happening to my body. And I later learned that that was a panic attack. I went through, in order for them to be cautious, I went through a number of cardiovascular tests, stress tests, nuclear tests, ultrasounds, and all kind of things, just to make sure that it wasn't a heart issue, that it was actually anxiety. And it was anxiety. And since then, I started getting treatment for it in the form of medication. And it helped a lot, but it was still something that I would face every single day. And it's like once I had a name for it, the enemy used that name to almost escalate its effects in my life. Because before, I had been living with it and didn't really know what was going on, didn't pay a lot of attention to the symptoms that I was having. But once it was labeled and there was a medication for it, it's like the enemy used that to basically say, look, something's wrong with you. Change my identity from who I was to now hello, my name is anxiety. This is what I have, and this is who I am. And so fast forward to a few years, I started getting actual counseling for it. And the thing about anxiety, which I'm going to touch on today, is that it's never really about the issues that you think are making you anxious right now. It's always a trigger for something, some trauma or something that happened previous. And so I began to unpack those things in a very difficult process. And God is really helping me to deal with my anxiety. But it is something that takes God, counseling, medication, support system, every outlet and avenue that is available, I utilize it. And I am okay 100% with saying that because it's real. And if you had high blood pressure, you would be using diet, exercise, making sure you were okay, making sure you were taking your medicine, seeing your doctor regularly, and it's no different. There's a stigma that goes with mental health, but it's still a health issue. So at the end of the day, I want to allow my experiences to be an example and maybe a way for others to understand what they're going through and to help with that. So I put dealing and not dealing with anxiety because let's be honest, we don't always deal with the things that we're supposed to be dealing with, right? And I'm going to talk about some of those ways that we deal and not deal with anxiety. When I first found out that what I had was anxiety, I realized that there were some things that were going on with me that I didn't initially label as anxiety, or I didn't realize that they were anxiety. And I found this slide, and it honestly had a lot of them that I had experienced before but didn't realize were anxiety. So I put this up there. It said, feeling unable or too afraid to speak up. Now, if you ask my mom and dad, they will tell you that has never really been one of my issues. I did not say my husband could say amen. I said my mom and dad. But for a lot of people who feel anxious, they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid for their voice to be heard. They're afraid for what they say to be scrutinized. Don't want to come off as stupid. That's another reason why people don't speak up. A lot of things, I hear a lot of people say, when they don't talk in a conversation or add to it, and it's like, why didn't you say anything? Well, I mean, y'all were all talking, and I didn't want to look stupid. That's a feeling of anxiety, even if you don't recognize that that's what that is. Feeling like I had to overachieve and be the best at everything, and know everything to be considered intelligent. That is something that I've dealt with. That is why I have 3 college degrees and I work nonstop, right? Because for some reason there is this sense of needing to overachieve to just be average. This sense of like, I have to go extra to just keep up with everybody else. Thinking everyone could see inside my head. Anybody ever felt like people can see your thoughts or read your thoughts or know what's going on or know what you're thinking? Believing that everyone is silently judging you, that's a huge one for anxiety. Feeling like you're in a room and everyone that looks at you is thinking something about you or talking about you or judging you for something. Thinking that I had to be perfect to avoid judgment. Criticizing my every movement. Self-criticism is huge for people with anxiety. We criticize ourselves so much. Worried about every word choice when I'm around intelligent people. I know somebody that literally will tell, I've heard them say over and over and over, like, I don't even know how to talk. I don't even know how to talk. And I'm like, yes, you do. You talk. Just talk. But it's that anxiety that says what I have to say isn't good enough to measure up to what everyone else is saying around me. And I just want to squash some of those right now, because we all have a voice and our voice needs to be heard. Because there is something that you are going to say that's going to bless the people around you that I could never say, or the person next to you to your right or your left could say. Everyone, God gave each and every one of us, with all of our physical health issues, mental health issues, hot mess express issues, all the things, He still gave us all these abilities to reach people. That's the ultimate goal, that God put in us the ability to reach people. And if we are silencing ourselves, then we are not doing what God has called us to do. I want to talk a little bit about stress versus anxiety, just simply to draw a distinction between the two, because I feel like that's one of the reasons why it's a trend word, because stress is so prevalent and people confuse stress with anxiety. So stress is your body's reaction to a trigger, and it's usually a short-term experience. We talked about this Wednesday night. Positive stress, tolerable stress, and then occasionally if it's prolonged and you don't have protective layers, you don't have any type of therapies, you don't have supportive people around you, it becomes toxic stress. On the other hand, anxiety is apprehension, tension, or uneasiness that stems from the anticipation of danger or an uncertain outcome. The response of anxiety is often triggered by stress. So stress is a precursor to anxiety, not an equivalent of anxiety. There are some key differences between stress and anxiety. Stress is typically transient, meaning it moves. It doesn't stay for very long. Symptoms of stress are transient as well. If you've ever had children, you've probably experienced stress. And they can, I know Sunday mornings can be typically challenging when you have small children. And sometimes you can come to church and be really stressed and feel really tense, feel kind of irritable, feel, you might feel some tightness in your chest. That's not necessarily anxiety. That's just the stress of the morning, of getting everything together, of getting here. Generally, stress is a response to an external issue. Just like I just said, my kids are misbehaving. Nobody's doing what they're supposed to do. They're spilling everything everywhere. We need to get out the door in 10 minutes. You're still in your pajamas. What is going on? Okay, that's external events that trigger stress. For anxiety, it lasts longer after the threat is in the past. So after the situation is gone and over, if you have that same situation that I just mentioned with church, and then you get here and you're here on time, everyone's in the room, everyone's accounted for, everyone's worshiping, then what happens physically? Like those symptoms dissipate, right? Because the stress was linked to the hurry of getting here. But once you're here, it's transient, it's left. Well, anxiety stays long after, years after the trauma has occurred. Anxiety causes significant distress and or impairment in social, occupational, and other areas of functioning, more than just temporary, like real problems in the ways that we function. Present even in the absence of a stressor. So just like I was talking about with my example when I had my first panic attack, I was not talking. Holly and I were laughing about a story from when I was younger. Like, it was totally not a stressor present. Now, I mean, yeah, I was in a hospital going through testing. There was that, but my mind wasn't immediately focused on that stressor, and the panic attack was still triggered because anxiety is no respecter of circumstances, and it doesn't need anything to happen right now for it to occur. And it can be caused by internal or external factors. I saw this quote, and I just had to put it up here. It said, "Anxiety is like a toddler, never stops talking, tells you you're wrong about everything, and wakes you up at 3 a.m. If anyone has ever had anxiety, you will completely understand why there's humor in that. Here's a chart of some impacts of anxiety on the different parts of ourselves. So our body can have sweating, headache, chest pain, stomach upset, trembling, elevated heart rate, shortness of breath, and muscle tension. Our emotions will have a sense of apprehension or dread, nervousness, feeling on edge, low confidence, being overwhelmed, fearful, irritable. Our behaviors, how do we act out different when we are having anxiety? We'll have more compulsions. That's not convulsions, it's compulsions. It's like when you have a tendency to do something over and over, like you have to do it, like I have to go check the locks, even though I check them. And I have this thing at night, like I check all the doors and set the alarm before I go upstairs. And I go upstairs, and before I put my phone on my nightstand, I look on the app to make sure they're set. Like somehow between the 18 steps between the bottom and the top, everything could have come undone in my life, right? That's just like a compulsion. I need to make sure that I'm safe and secure in this house, right? Reassurance seeking. That doesn't always look like attention seeking. Reassurance seeking is more like, are you sure that was okay? You know, you just need that reassurance because you feel so insecure that people reassuring you that what you're doing is good and what you're doing is relevant. It helps to counteract that. Overworking, insomnia, social isolation, nervous habits, procrastination, and avoidance. I don't know about you, but I can find myself in a lot of those behaviors if I'm not careful, just without even realizing it. Because that's the thing, when you don't really know that you have anxiety, you fall into these patterns of behaviors and you don't associate them with any one thing. But then when you see it on a chart like this and you're like, wow, like 6 out of 8 of those things are, wow. It can really kind of open your mind to realize, like, I might possibly be dealing with anxiety and not know it. Our mind will be full of worry, have a foggy brain, unable to clear through your thoughts. Negativity, indecision, rumination, obsessions, overthinking, racing thoughts, and intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts are thoughts that you don't want to think, but that just invade your mental space. There are some statistics about anxiety. The first one, it is the most common mental illness in the U.S. It is the most common. It affects more than 40 million people in the U.S. That is 19.1% of the population. So if we go by 19.1%, that's almost 1 out of every 5. So in this room right now, I'm terrible with numbers, but I would look around and say maybe about 120 people here. So that would mean that there were, 35, right? No? I'm bad with numbers. Okay, 1 out of every 5 of us would have anxiety. So in a room this size, that would be about 20 people. Okay, 20, 22, 23 people would have anxiety. An estimated 264 million adults suffer with anxiety around the world. So that 40 million is in the U.S., but 264 million around the world suffer with anxiety. It is highly treatable, but only 36% of people will actually seek treatment. People with anxiety disorders are 3 to 5 times more likely to go to the doctor, typically for symptoms that are related to anxiety, and they just don't know that that's what it's related to. It's more common in more common in females than in males. 38% of adolescent females and 26% of adolescent males experience regular symptoms of anxiety. That really shook me to my core. I was not prepared for there to be that many adolescents dealing with anxiety. Adults aging 26 to 49 are most likely to suffer than any other age group. They attribute some of that to being at that age, you're becoming a lot of times empty nesters, and there's some anxiety that comes with going back to your core family, just you and your spouse. Also, at that age, a lot of people are dealing with their elderly parents, and there are some things that some stressors that go with that can cause an onset of anxiety. And also, that's typically the age that people realize that they may or may not be prepared for their retirement, and that brings on a lot of financial stress as well. Women who suffer with anxiety are 3 to 4 times more likely to also develop depression. Anxiety and calmness. Anxiety and calmness, they're not opposites, they're neighbors. They are separated by a thin line of perception. And I think that is one of the most misconstrued things about anxiety is if you don't know a lot about anxiety and someone tells you they share one of their worries or concerns with you, it's very easy to invalidate that. It's very easy to just go, but that's not the truth. But that's not, because we see it on the other side so clearly. But the thing is that line of perception is so blurred for the person that has anxiety, because they are seeing their truth the way that their mind is telling them that truth. And even though we can see something different on the outside world and their beliefs may feel irrational to us, and we don't see why I can't just talk you out of that, or I can't just rationalize and reason with you and teach you that that's not the truth. It's because that line of perception is blurred for them. Their mind tells them a different truth, and as wholly as you believe the truth from your side, they believe the truth from their side as well. At the root of your anxiety will lie the story you are telling yourself. This story is a fearful projection of your past hurt and pain onto your present and future. I read this quote probably 2 years ago, and I thought that was such a brilliant explanation, because the story that we tell ourselves becomes our truth. And if we're not careful, it will become our truth. And it will take, our story is built on our experiences and the way that we felt those experiences, whether they were true or not. It's through the perception of how we coped with them, dealt with them, and eventually the story we wrote with them. And we have to be careful, because we will do that in a survival mode, and it will cause the story not to be an accurate story. But it will be the story that becomes our truth, because it's what we had to do to feel better. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. An anxious mind, it robs your self-belief, creates problems that aren't there, cultivates fear and dread, makes you avoid things that are good for you, traps you in a web of lies, fills your head with perceived threats, and stops you from doing things that you enjoy. Anxiety is a robber and it is an isolator, because the very first thing that you're going to feel is that need to like block everybody else off. Whether it be because when you try to talk to someone, they don't understand, or because the anxiety is telling you, like, I can't go talk, I can't be around them, I can't, whatever it is going to try to isolate. And so you have to know that in advance and be careful of that. Anxiety can look like what others see versus what I feel inside. Others see me as always on time. When I say me, I'm talking about just in general. People see me as always on time. But really what's happening is an intense distress and fear and panic of being late. So think about the people in your life, and think about when I have these what others see descriptions, and see if there's possibly something going on beyond what you see. Because sometimes people just don't like being late, but sometimes it comes from a place of true fear and distress and panic over, if I'm late, this is going to happen. And that drives them to always being early. A strong work ethic, is really an intense fear of doing something wrong and being criticized. So I'm scared that I'm going to do a bad job, and so I overwork. And what it translates to you is, oh, she's such a hard worker. Well, but you don't know what's driving that. It's not just, oh, I'm a hard worker. It's the fact, my mom says all the time, and I've shared this in our mental health group, small group, but I hear her tell people all the time, she's such a hard worker. She never stops. And it's a compliment coming from her. Like, she intends it to be a compliment. Like, she is such a hard worker. But on the other side of that hard worker is a girl that feels like, if I stop working, then what's going to happen, right? What happens in the silence? What happens when there's no work? What happens when I'm not taking care of something? So a strong work ethic can look like an intense fear of doing something wrong. Always in control is a fear of being unprepared or out of control. Good at planning can be overthinking and playing out all the worst case scenarios. My husband's pointing at me. He's calling me out this morning. Being super, super good at planning, it's because I plan for every single contingency. Like, it's like, okay, well, we got to have this, because if this happens, I got plan A to Z, right? There is very few things that are going to catch me off guard. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. It's not a good thing. Very organized. I'm intensely overwhelmed without extreme planning. So I have to organize everything. This goes back into the planning. I have to organize everything, plan everything so that nothing catches me by surprise. I'm prepared for any situation. Feeling super helpful. I'm afraid of what others will think if I say no, right? Overextending yourself because you're afraid of your own no. You're afraid that your acceptance comes through your willingness to help people. If I start telling you no and I set that boundary to protect myself, then will my worth to you diminish? Calm and composed is constantly in a freeze mode, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about being in a freeze mode. What we don't see, how I behave. When I'm easily irritable, I am consumed with worry or stress, and I feel out of control. Sometimes it's not just mad. Sometimes it's not just, I don't know why I'm irritable. Sometimes people are irritable because they have a ton of worry and stress, and they feel like they're spinning out of control and don't know what to do with it. So it comes across as irritability. Needing to know plans ahead of time. I struggle to handle uncertainty and end up overthinking. How many of you like to be spontaneous? Yeah, not that many, huh? Why? Because it feels like things are spinning out of control when I don't know what's going on, right? I actually know people that say, do not give me a surprise party. It'll be like the worst thing that'll ever happen to me, right? Do not throw me a surprise party. I don't care if everybody I love is there. I don't care if they all brought me $100. I don't care if it's all my favorite food. Do not give me a surprise party, okay? I'm not like that. I like surprise parties. But if they're well planned. Back to that control thing, right? Delayed responses to messages can be a sense of when I'm stressed or overwhelmed, I may shut down. My son he has a cell phone now, and he texts me, and I had to set a text tone just for him, because if he texts me and I don't text him back almost immediately, I get 17, mom, 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 are you okay? Mom. I'm like, I'm okay. Are you okay? Like, I was literally washing my hands. It's okay. I'll get to you in a couple of seconds. So because I have a tendency, if I'm doing something and my phone goes off, like, it's not a priority for me. I'll get it when I get done. Because I'm from the old school, like, we didn't even have phones. We had, like, corded phones, and then they came out with cordless phones, and then bag phones, which we had to ship between cars, depending on, who was in the most emergent situation possibly. And so, like, a cell phone to me is not like, if I was gone all day and all I had was a landline, you'd have to wait. So, I'm not going to come down off the ladder just because my phone's ringing. So I had to set a different text tone to Lincoln, because that means stop everything you're doing. Da 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 da. That's Lincoln. Go get the phone and text him back before, he starts stressing over it. But I had to do that because one of my major things is when I shut down, like, I know, like, it's just like I don't feel like talking to anybody, which I'm not a huge phone talker anyway. My husband loves to talk on the phone. So we talked on the phone a lot when we were dating because it was long distance, but I am such a texter. So I told him the other day, I'm like, why don't we compromise and do voice text? Like, you get like 59 seconds, right? You can say everything you need to say and send it to me in 59 seconds, and then I'll send you something cute back. Canceling plans. I worry about socializing and leave exhausted because I'm on high alert, right? So I don't know, some of my introverted people may identify with this. Like, I don't know how many times I have made plans when my mental health was good. And by the time that date rolled around, I was like, are you kidding me? What did I commit myself to? Because that need to just like, oh, I just want to stay home and I just don't want to do anything and all of that. And also, if you're dealing with anxiety and you're worried about what you say and you're worried about interacting and you have some social anxiety, when you actually do go to the event, you are exhausted the whole time. It's not, I see people like Anthony, for instance. He can mix and mingle. You could put him in a room with strangers and there would not be a dead silence ever. Like, he can talk to anyone. It is a gift. It's a gift. I do not have that gift. Like, I am very specific. I think about what I need to say before I say it. I say things only when they need to be said. Like, he says, why don't you ever chit chat? I'm like, I don't even know how to chit chat. Like, what? So, I mean, my chit-chatting stops at, how are you? Like, after that, you got to give me something to work with, because if not, we're just going to sit in silence, and I'm okay with that. Over-analyzing situations. I need to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Reading too much into things. This is huge. I worry about how people may judge me. So I'm going to read everything into what's going on, overanalyze every situation. Always need to be in control, because something in my life will go wrong if I'm not doing it myself. Okay? That need to, if it goes wrong and I'm in control, I can blame me. I can handle that. But I don't need it to go wrong and you be in control. I need to be the one that's in control if things go wrong. All right. The anxiety cycle. This is the cycle. If you want to take a picture of this, it could be very beneficial to you, especially once I explain it. The fear stimulus is the first step, right? That's the intrusive thought or the situation that triggers you. That is when, and this is the cycle, honestly, that I was in for about 16 years. So you can find yourself in this cycle for a very long time. And still, I revert back to it. I have to be very conscious about not going back to this cycle continuously. So a situation triggers your fear, or you have an intrusive thought. So it can be something that actually happens, Or it can be that thought that comes out of nowhere, right? Like, I am perfectly fine, and now all of a sudden, everything I've ever done wrong is in my head, right? So that intrusive thought or the situation is the first step. And then you misinterpret that threat. Misinterpreting the presence of the thought sensations can be dangerous, right? Because you are taking this fear and you are misinterpreting what's going on. So I'm going to use an illustration that I think everyone will understand. It's very simple, but I'm going to use it just for the purpose of understanding. So if you had ever been bitten by a dog, and now you have a fear of dogs because one dog bit you and it hurt, and that's fine, but you're afraid of all dogs now. So anytime you see a dog, number one, it triggers that fear, right? And then two is a misrepresentation of the threat. That dog is bad. That dog is going to bite me, right? It's not the dog that did it. Not all dogs are, but that dog in particular caused you to have a misinterpretation of the perceived threat. That every dog is going to. Then the anxious feeling starts, the anxiety, the feeling that something's not right, something's wrong, I'm not going to be okay. So that triggers, I talked a little bit about the amygdala hijack. So when the anxiety gets triggered, your brain, your frontal cortex is trying to say, okay, is there a real threat? Is this dog really going to hurt me? But because of the way that you have wired your brain to thinking that all dogs will, it's hijacked by your amygdala, and you immediately go into either fight, flight, or freeze. Freeze is when you just completely shut down and stay in a frozen state where you are just kind of just existing through life. And then flight is like you're going to run away and avoid the fear, avoid what's happening. And fight is you're going to fight it out. You're going to combat this thing, but not in a good way. So the anxiety kicks in and it says, okay, this dog is going to hurt me. This dog right here is going to hurt me, even though maybe it never hasn't or never would. Then this safety-seeking behavior. So what am I going to do to avoid this problem? How am I going to do it? Am I going to fight, flight, or freeze during this? Temporary relief from anxiety is brought on when you do that behavior, right? So if I fight, flight, or freeze, all three of those are going to bring me relief. They're not changing the situation. They're not helping me, but they're bringing me relief. And then what happens is then because there's an absence of the corrective experience, so I don't really learn how to deal with dogs. I continue to fight, flight, or freeze. Then it tells my brain, oh, that was the right thing to do because now you're safe, right? And so when you encounter another dog again, your brain is now wired to do that same thing that it did in steps 2, fight, flight, or freeze, because that's what worked. And every single time you are doing something, you experience a threat and survive, however you handled it, your brain says, ooh, let's do that again. That worked. I'm still alive. Even if it's not the correct thing to do. Your brain doesn't rationalize that. It just says, we survived that. That was good. And so what we have to do is learn to rewire our brains. And it's through a process called neuroplasticity. This just basically means that your brains have the ability to learn again, basically, to be rewired into and retrained. Because what happens in that cycle is you are constantly telling your brain that you made the right decision. And so every time that happens, it reinforces the anxiety. And the threat gets higher. So the next time you're around dogs, you think, I'm not going to be as afraid because I survived that. But actually what happens is the anxiety is intensified. And so the response has to be intensified again. And it goes through this cycle over and over. So there are a couple of things that you can do to lay down new neural pathways or new roadways for your brain to start rewiring and retraining itself to be able to behave differently. The first is to make an exposure hierarchy. And this is basically where you are going to break down something that gives you anxiety. And you're going to break it down into really, really small, manageable steps. And you're going to take one step and you're going to change the rules on it. So you're going to allow yourself to do something that's uncomfortable. Now, if we take the dog situation that I just, example that I just gave, it would be like saying, I am going to be around a dog for 10 minutes. And I'm not, no matter how I feel, I'm going to stay around this dog for 10 minutes. You're setting a small, manageable goal. And instead, you're not saying, I'm going to do this until I feel anxious. Because when you do that, your brain is giving you a way out. Because now it knows all I have to do is feel anxious and she's going to leave. So what you have to do is say, instead, I will do this, even if it makes me anxious, for X amount of minutes. And doing that, then you are facing your fears. And in facing your fears, you are staying in the thing that is giving you anxiety. You're resisting the urge to escape. And you're celebrating the small victories and increase the time that you're engaged until you have retrained your brain that, okay, maybe dogs are safe. Now, I know that the dog example is really simple and maybe not relevant to a lot of us. It can look like going to a social gathering. Avoidance would be like going to a social gathering and finding a reason to leave early. Okay, using this to retrain your brain would be like, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to 3 people before I leave. Okay, and then I'm going to leave. No matter how short those conversations are, I'm going to have 3 conversations and then I'm going to allow myself to leave. And then you're training yourself that it's okay to go and interact. I don't have to go and look for an excuse to leave. Or the next time, then now I'm going to go and I'm going to maybe stay for X amount of minutes or have a different number of conversations. So each time you're taking that small manageable step, and before you know it, you're able to go to that social interaction and have that engagement, talk to people, and before you realize that you're comfortable in that situation, whereas before it was so dreaded because of your anxiety. So whatever situations you find yourself in, you can use this and apply this to retrain what's going on with you. There are a few other coping strategies. Counseling, of course, find a local therapist to help you identify the cause of your anxiety. I highly recommend that because anxiety is not just what's going on with you right now. Breathing and meditation, guided breathing exercises. I talked Wednesday about the 4-7-8 model. Breathe in your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, breathe out your mouth for 8. It really regulates your central nervous system and helps you to calm down. There are a ton of mindfulness meditation apps that are really, really good for helping you through breathing. If you have an Apple Watch, they even have some mindfulness exercises on it that are really good. Positive affirmations. Change your mindset by the way you think and talk to yourself. Okay, put sticky notes with positive affirmations all over, because what you think about yourself becomes the truth about yourself. So you have to feed positivity into. A healthy lifestyle, clinically shown to reduce mental illness issues by more than 30%. Good diet, exercise will help reduce your mental health issues. And then have a plan. Make sure someone knows the plan and can help you when you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Find someone that you trust and supports you, that you can say, hey, when this happens, this is my response. And I may not be able to reach out for help. If you go into freeze and shutdown mode, that's a dangerous place, especially because of the comorbidity with depression and anxiety, because being isolated and not having the ability, because you're in freeze mode, to be able to reach out to someone is very dangerous mentally. So have a plan in play. So you don't have to be suicidal to need a plan. That's just a way for someone to help you get out of whatever you're feeling. To be able to say, hey, if you text me and I don't text you back, after several hours, it might be because something's going on. I might need you to take this step to reach out. Because I'm going to need somebody to help me out of this. And then the very last thing that I have, because I couldn't not be spiritual at all. Psalm 94:19. I love this. It says, "When my anxiety was great within me, your comfort brought me joy." And I hope that, I know it's been very different from what I normally do on Sundays, but I hope that it's been informative and that it has helped you to understand a little bit more about anxiety. And if you're dealing with it, hopefully there are some tools that you can put into play. Don't forget to get your children in the back, and we'll see you back at 10 o'clock.